Sava the other day, and you could get 2 of a certain brand of cereal and get $3 off a pound of coffee. So I thought, well, this is great. And I had my younger son, who's 13, say, okay, go look at some of the cereals. And he knows we don't get the real sugary ones, but he was checking them out and was cracking himself up because there was like some Disney cereal, like Mulan or something, and it said princess flavored marshmallows. Oh. And yeah, I know, right? So anyway, all right, it's 1 o'clock, and so I am going to turn things over to Sarah, and we're gonna welcome everybody to the webinar and take it away.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, good afternoon / good morning, everyone. I know we have people calling in from all over the country, and I think we've decided all over the world because we have at least a little international representation.
Toronto counts, yeah.
Toronto definitely counts as international. So my name is Sarah Kurtz McKinnon. I'm one of the faculty members with Expert Online Training. I'm here with Dr. Chris Thurber and Alex Myers to talk more about how do we help prepare our staff to best welcome transgender campers to camp. So I'm really excited to learn more. This is such an evolving topic, and I think the more conversations we have around it, the better equipped we can be to serve all the youth and adults who come through our gates every year. So Expert Online Training provides it's just in the name. Whenever I try to describe it, it's online training by experts in the summer camp field for summer camp staff. So we have an amazing library of videos, quizzes, tutorials that summer camp staff can learn from some of the best faculty in different aspects of camping. So we recommend you check it out, expertonlinetraining.com, and we have some supplementary materials on our website as well if you want to see a link to the recording of the webinar or a link to the other stuff that we're doing.
And I'll just give you a little shout out, some of the other stuff. Before we let Alex introduce himself, I'm Chris Thurber, one of the co-founders of Expert Online Training, and along with Alex, I work here at Phillips Exeter Academy as a clinician and as a teacher. But one of the things you can check out for free on expertonlinetraining.com is one of our new video training modules called Gender and Sexuality in Youth Programs, and that was co-hosted by your very own Sarah Kurtz McKinnon, as well as Scott Arizala, who's one of our faculty members, and Alex Myers advised us on the script. So that's a perfect segue for Alex to introduce himself, and then we can get right to the discussion.
Great.
Fabulous.
Well, I'm happy to be here today. I am an English teacher here at Phillips Exeter, and I also work teaching about gender identity and how to make schools and other institutions inclusive for transgender and gender nonconforming students and campers and athletes and everything else. So it's work I've been doing for about 22 years now, ever since I came out as transgender myself.
Perfect. Well, welcome. We're so glad to have you here. So I'm excited to ask you some questions. So I think we've covered all the introductory details. And I think I'm going to frame my questions in the respect of, let's pretend our audience are camp directors who know that they have a transgender campers coming to camp this summer. So we've kind of already gone through the registration process, the process of establishing our camp's mission and values and inclusivity statement. So we know that this is a population that we're welcoming this summer, and we have a bunch of counselors who are going to be directly serving all of our campers. And so my first question is, who on camp needs to know about a transgender child's history? What do those people need to know? Is this even the same for every child? How do we even start when the session's about to happen and we know that these particular children are coming to camp?
Yeah, I think you started to answer the way I would, which is that for every kid it's going to be different, and it's going to depend on where they are in their transition and their experiences that they've had in terms of how they've been supported or not supported, perhaps at a school or at another youth group. So some parents are going to say, please tell all the counselors, we want everyone to know so that they can support this. And other parents are going to say, let the medical staff and the administration know, but not anyone else, because we don't want it getting out. Some kids, likewise, will be very comfortable disclosing to peers or to counselors, correcting people if they're misgendered, and other campers won't be able to self-advocate. So I think the best thing a camp director can do is start those conversations with the parents and with the camper, and then check in regularly, because they might change their mind, or they might talk to some other people who are part of the camp and have an adjusting and developing perspective on that.
It's a great answer, and I think a fairly straightforward thing for directors and staff to do, Alex. And I think the curiosity is around the novelty of someone being transgender. So the customized approach to say, something else that might need to be known about a camper is something that we do well, right? And sometimes it's a subset of the folks at camp who need to know something. Sometimes it's a larger group. But I think it's so important that people understand what you just said, so that we don't get caught up in either a cookie cutter approach to different kids, because we don't do it for other things. So we shouldn't do it, for their gender identity. And also that I think owners and directors and the rest of the staff relax a little bit about having a transgender camper or many transgender campers at camp. And remember that, if you, the early, traditional camps, let's say from the 1880s, nobody's talking about, gender or sexuality. There were boys' camps and girls' camps, but the mission was clearly to serve kids, get them outside, get them playing with each other, learning in experiential ways, and none of that's changing. So right. People can stay kind of anchored in what it is that they, signed up to do, working, owning, directing a camp in the first place. And this webinar series from Expert Online Training really designed to help directors be in a better position to train their staff. And I think it's a great thing for directors to remind their staff, look, for the most part, we're going to keep doing what we've always done. So
I think they might also want to remind their staff that counselors may have transgender campers and may not know that they have transgender campers. And in fact, counselors might want to know and still not be told. It's information that it's the camper's right to share or not, or the parent's right to share or not. And so to remind counselors that just because they perceive something does not mean that they should pursue it until they have that knowledge, that the camp and the parents and the campers have the right to maintain that privacy.
Yeah, this is super interesting to me, because my first priority is keeping all the campers at camp safe. And so if there is a transgender camper in the cabin, I would imagine that also, depending on where that person is in their transition, they might have different needs, or I don't know, something like that. So it seems to me, though, that the best approach is to take the parents' lead and then prepare all the counselors for the fact that we serve transgender campers, and there's certain things that you can do to make all campers safe, and you don't need to know their personal information unless they elect to share it with you. Did I pick up kind of
exactly
the right summarization from what you both were saying? Because it is complicated.
Yeah, I would agree.
And camp's like the smallest town in America, and so people feel entitled to information sometimes. So prefacing it with, we don't tell you all the campers' information. We don't tell you who's on scholarship, who's not. You don't have a right to know everybody's, gender history or that sort of thing. Maybe can tone down the expectation of people being in others' business.
Yep.
Alex, there's a question about, would you do anything differently if a camper identified as gender non-binary?
I think being gender non-binary or non-conforming, and there are a lot of acceptable terms for that category, they're going to be more visible than someone who is transgender and has transitioned from being a boy to being a girl, or vice versa. So a non-binary or gender fluid camper is probably going to display and express their gender in ways that that vary throughout the summer, and is therefore not going to be able to be closeted in the way that a transgender kid might be. So I think if you have a student who identifies in that manner, you might talk to them about, again, before the session starts, where they feel comfortable being housed, how they want to explain this to their counselor. Do they want to do it themselves? Would they like the director to do it so they don't have to have that conversation and it's simply understood when they show up at camp? And then I always encourage camps and institutions to kind of do a little, what I would call a gender audit, and just go through your facilities and policies and dress codes and say, where does gender show up? Where do we expect boys to do one thing and girls to do something else? And where might a gender fluid camper just not feel that they know what to do, where to go, who to be with at a certain point in time? And anticipate that so that they don't have to constantly be self-advocating and correcting and or being made uncomfortable because they can't do those things.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just related to that, before we get to maybe the next question, either that Rita posed or that Sarah has, Alex, like, what if somebody makes a mistake? What if it could be a mistake in terminology, or, you know, they trying to gather up the group of campers and say, you know, come on guys, let's go, without thinking, or at a girls' camp, let's go ladies, or whatever it might be, and maybe not making everyone feel as included. And as you said, sometimes people will speak up. Sometimes you'll have a fellow staff member that will say, hey, you know, next time use folks or friends. But, you know, camp counselors are a really dedicated bunch. What advice do you have for the directors who are tuning in today, when they're aware that they or some other staff member has made some kind of a misstep, you know, by accident?
Right. I make mistakes with people's pronouns and names too. And I always try to apologize, and I try to do that in the moment so that other people can see that I'm, and I model that for them. I say, "Oop, sorry, I got the pronoun wrong, my bad." And if I don't realize that I've done it until later, I will apologize the next time that group is convened, again, so that it's public and so that people get the model of how to correct. And then if I feel like that apology maybe put the kid on the spot, I'll try and follow up a little bit and say, I'm really sorry about that. You know, please tell me how you're feeling around this. I think, you know, harder sometimes is to correct someone else, especially if you've got a group of kids and one of them messes up the name or the pronoun, or says something that's very inappropriately gendered that reveals some stereotypes. And as a counselor or a teacher, you don't necessarily want to shut that kid down, even though they've said something that's problematic. And so there's a fine balance to be had between supporting the transgender or gender fluid camper, but not hurting the feelings of the person who made the mistake.
Yeah.
So we got a series of questions in the chat window here about, I think my first question was working on the assumption that the parents were on board and this was kind of like a smoother type of situation. And then folks in the chat said a couple of things that they're experiencing are either a camper comes out as transgender at camp and the parents or the guardians don't know about this camper situation, or a camper is transgender, but the parents know and they're like totally not on board and not supportive. So what is our responsibility as camp professionals to serve these kids the best way that we can? And also remember that we're also serving their parents. You know, we're in the middle of a very, very intimate situation.
Right. Yeah, and I have not seen this come up at camps that I've worked with, but I have seen it come up at schools. And I think caught in a similar fashion. And I think it's super important for directors and administrators to think this through before you have the circumstance, because there's a couple of moves that you want to be really cautious about making. My instinct is to say, support the camper in the identity that they have, let them use the name they want to use, let them dress how they want to dress. And if they say, please don't tell my parents, then respect that and don't tell their parents. However, begin the conversation with the child. If this is who you are, when will it feel comfortable to tell your parents? What can I do to help make that happen? Is there a conversation, maybe not outing you, but around this topic that I could try to facilitate? Or could I point your parents towards resources so that when they do go home, it's not, they have at least anticipated that this is a conversation they may have in the future. But the real hard part is, so you support the camper and they are wearing skirts when they want to wear skirts. And then mom and dad calls and says, I hear my son is wearing skirts. What are you doing at your camp? What do you say then? And you want to be able to reply in a way that's not, that's something you should talk about with your child, right? Because that puts the burden right back on a kid who's not ready to have that conversation. So you want to be ready to defend and explain what you're doing without lying, but without endangering that child. So anticipating the remarks that are going to be made and saying, here at camp, we let our campers explore their identity. Here at camp, we often allow campers to dress up. Here at camp, if a kid wants to go by a nickname, we really don't question that. Camp is a place to try on new identities, to become someone you're not at home, and to not make it about gender automatically, and to, again, be honest, but also a little bit deflect the attention from what you have told the camper we're not going to disclose.
Yeah. One of the cool things, if I can add to that, Alex, is one of the wonderful things about what you said is, and I think, the directors and owners who are part of our webinar today and those who will watch the recording, they are often in the position of like defending their program, defending their decision, defending, something as small as their choice of equipment, to defending their decision to call off Mountain Day because it looked like it might rain, and everything in between. What's wonderful about what you said is it leans on the camp's mission. And one of the things that we discussed with you, Alex, when Scott and Sarah were about to film their new video for Expert Online Training, was, look, if you need to take a second look at your mission statement, this would be the time to do it, and be sure that it includes a statement of inclusivity that is in accord with the, if there's a governing organization, if it's an agency camp, or you've checked with your, board of trustees, if you're an independent nonprofit or whatever it is, but make sure that that's received an update and has a statement of inclusivity. And as you think through with your senior staff, how are we going to best support and manage everybody's individuality? That revision, which you can publish on your website, which you can include in the registration materials, is something that bolsters your response. We want to be supportive of parents as well, and they may have questions. They may wonder, as as Sarah phrased the question, why is this happening, or why are you letting them do this, or this is what I hear, and being able to refer back to the core values of the organization, I think is wonderful. And I suppose that, parents, of course, have a choice about what programs they enroll their kids in, and, they can vote with their feet next season if they want to. But, it's when it feels like a well thought out position, as you just articulated, then I think even skeptical parents, or parents who feel like they're new to this topic, will feel reassured in some way. Right. Yeah. So, and before we go on to the next question, I want to just pause for 1 second here and give a shout out to one of the sponsors of our webinar series, and that's everythingsummercamp.com. And I'll put in the chat room a link to that website. They make I think the best foot lockers in the industry, and lots of other things that for day or resident camp you need in terms of supplies. So it's everythingsummercamp.com. And at the end of the webinar, I will pull 2 random names from the list of attendees, and those 2 folks will get each a $50 gift certificate. So stick around to the end. All right, Sarah, back to you.
I love raffles. pleases me.
Do I count as an attendee? Can I randomly choose
Yeah,
my
with your
name?
own raffle, Chris. I'm sorry. So we have a lot of questions in the chat, but I wanted to return to some of these questions around staff, and then we'll kind of go back to the chat questions if we have time. So my next question is, what do transgender campers need from camp staff? So either we know that this camper is transitioning or has transitioned, or we know in general we serve transgender campers. What do our camp counselors need to know, and what do the best staff do to fully support our kids?
I think transgender campers, and a lot of what I'll say, I think probably all campers want, but particularly transgender campers, is privacy. I think it's necessary. Sometimes a lot of younger kids have socially transitioned, but not medically transitioned. And so their bodies don't match the bodies of their girl or boy peers. And so if they're going to pass and feel safe and comfortable in a cabin or in a shower facility, they need privacy to change and privacy to shower. And it's no good if they're the only one asking for that. And so one thing that counselors need to do and camps need to do is set up an expectation of privacy and an expectation that there is really no public nudity. And so that the transgender kid isn't the only one asking for that, but counselors are enforcing that across the board. And I think it's also important for counselors to be ready to anticipate conversations that are going to go in a very not even conversations, but even activities that are going to go in a very gendered perspective. So if you have a gender non-conforming kid and the girls' cabin is always going to paint their nails and do their hair fancy, are you going to force that kid who may be a tomboy to do something in the name of quote unquote being a girl? And to anticipate that, or to see it starting to develop and to know how to diffuse it in a way that doesn't destroy the activity and the meaning for all the other campers.
And then on the flip side of things, when do adults fall short when working with transgender youth? What are some caveats or blind spots even that people might not see? Again, whether they know specifically about a child's background or just in general about their camper population.
Sometimes I see adults thinking, oh, if you were a girl and now you were raised as a girl and now you're living as a boy, there's this expectation that they're going to conform to real masculine behavior, and they don't allow trans kids to have a full gender identity the way they might others. And so there's sort of this weird, whoa, yeah, be transgender, but insisting on a binary afterwards. So again, just opening up to more gender fluidity is, I think, really healthy for all campers. And then I would say listening to what the kids are saying. Again, if you've only done a little training on transgender identity, you can sometimes think you get it. And then when a camper comes out, not really hear what they're telling you, but just kind of put them into the two boxes that you've learned. So to be open to a wide range of gender expressions and to variability within that. A kid who presents one way early in the session might present very differently later on, and to not be alarmed or to try to confine them to a narrower range of expression.
Is Chris on mute?
I had muted my microphone so that my typing wasn't bothering people.
We can hear you now.
I really like the expression binary afterward. What I think that speaks to is what is in large part human nature. We kind of want some certainty. We want to know like what's going on, and someone might say perfectly fine having this transgender boy or this transgender girl or a group of transgender kids in my day camp or overnight camp or Parks and Rec department, but like, just like tell me, are they, so which is it, like, are they a boy or girl? I gotta like get this straight because I'm learning new terminology and I'm trying to be open-minded about all this, and now I like got it straight. But as you're pointing out, and it's of course it's true for everyone, camp is a place where people are exploring different identities. The number one thing in the research that I got to help with the American Camp Association that kids said they loved about camp is at camp they got to be themselves. And they're young people and they're figuring it out. They're figuring out what it means to be themselves, and grown-ups are doing that too. And of course, it's nice to have some certainty in life, but if you're going to work with young people, you can't demand too much certainty because it's all about growth and development. So stating, expectations in a way that I think will prepare people for some of the different things that they'll see, an individual person behaving differently at the end of the session than they did at the beginning of the session, or at the end of the day than they did at the beginning of the day, and kind of, working to figure that out. It does stretch a lot of people's concept of gender, and it also highlights what, for all of us, may be a stereotype when we're thinking, wait a second, I thought that girl said she was a transgender girl, and now she's behaving in a way that is stereotypically masculine, and we may not say those words to ourselves, but we're aware of it somehow not making sense. But I think a lot of it is generational. I have two boys who were assigned male at birth and are cisgender boys right now anyway, and they have grown up here on the campus of Phillips Exeter Academy with other faculty kids who have parents who are, two moms or two dads or a single parent. And, since it started being discussed in, the middle of elementary school, I guess, the notion of someone being transgender or gender fluid, it's just been a part of their vocabulary, which it never was for me in elementary school or high school or college or graduate school for that matter. And they are, not at all anxious about it. It's just a thing, like, anything else that they might encounter at school, like somebody's name or how tall they are. And that's, I think, important for directors to remember. And if they're working with mostly college, university age staff, keeping in mind, and I think, Sarah, you and Scott say it in the video, a lot of those staff, unlike some of the directors and owners who are a bit older, they've kind of grown up with a lot of this and maybe a lot more comfortable with it than perhaps the older generation is, just because of the novelty, perhaps, of, and I don't mean the novelty of someone being transgender, but the newness of our making it part of national dialogue. But I said there's no reason why directors and owners can't look to their staff for some answers, or the staff setting a good example of how to make people feel comfortable in the setting.
Right. I often in this work find that the campers and the students are the ones who are good with it, and it's the parents and the adults in the room who do the training. So absolutely. And I think the only caveat to that I'd give is, just because you've met one transgender person does not mean that you understand transgender experience. Yes. And it's so important that you treat each transgender person as having their own individual identity and their own individual meaning, and really listen to what they're saying, what they're calling themselves, and what they're able to tell you that they want or need.
Yeah, for sure. And Alex, something you said there too about like the adults, the adult stakeholders in this, that's what we're getting some questions about. Thinking about, okay, if I allow a transgender girl to live in the girls' bunk, are the other parents in the bunk going to be upset with me or pull their kids from camp or threaten this camper somehow? What would you say to someone who's grappling with that, thinking that they're going to get pushback from their greater community, even if they're doing all the steps right internally in their camp to welcome a transgender camper?
I think it's really important to be open and upfront and public about who you are and what your policies are, because I think most parents feel betrayed or upset when they just didn't know that this would happen, when they feel that they have been sold a different product than what they thought they were going to get. So they said, if you can say, I thought I was sending my daughter to a girls' camp, and I didn't know you would allow transgender girls. So if you're going to allow transgender girls and you're going to put them in the bunk with the rest of the girls, say it. Say it openly, make it part of who you are, and give a good reason as to why, about, again, inclusivity and self-expression, and so on. Don't try to hide it, don't try to weasel around it, and say it before you have transgender girls who are there, so that, again, it doesn't become an issue of this particular kid. People can wrestle with a policy well before they wrestle with an individual. That would be my advice.
I would say, I think that in our research for our expert online training video, what we came across was you have to make sure you're ready to safely have a transgender camper at your camp before you're just like, sure, come on in. And then that kid is in the middle of a lot of stuff that they didn't ask for, didn't deserve.
And Sarah, I know we just have a couple minutes left,
yeah.
but I see that there are a few questions related to that preparation. And can you say a little bit what you and Scott talked about in the video helps with that preparation, both the physical plant, things like bathrooms, and what Alex was talking about of affording people privacy when they're changing and so forth. And then we'll remind people of two things. One, the follow-up email to everyone who's registered, whether they were able to attend or not, will include contact information for me, for Alex, for Sarah. So we encourage you to, if your question hasn't been answered during this brief half hour, to email one of us. The second thing is, in addition to watching a recording of the webinar, the video that you and Scott prepared, which extends some of the discussion we've had today, is also available for free. When people go to expertonlinetraining.com, they scroll to the very bottom of the homepage and look at the horizontal menu and click on Express. That's where they'll find some of these additional resources. But before we close out, can you say a little bit about that preparation? And then I have the names of the two people who won the raffle. So
Ooh, very exciting. Yeah, I mean, the preparation spans so many different levels. When we were researching it, we were thinking about kind of what are the values, what's the virtue signaling that our camp does to signal to all sorts of folks who we welcome and who we are. We talked about the physical plant. We talked about how are our showers set up? Do we have changing stalls in the bathroom? The wastebasket conversation in the chat right now is really interesting. Thinking about if I could imagine that I am X, Y, or Z person, can I walk through my whole day at camp and see where discomfort or problems might arise? Can I do the whole thing and make some small adjustments? And sometimes those adjustments require a lot of money or time or construction or permitting. Your county might require you have 3 women's bathrooms and 3 men's bathrooms and not count an all gender bathroom or something of that nature. So the third piece of this, I'm in Ann Arbor. It's ultra progressive. It's not as big of a deal here as it is in other parts of our state. So also understanding our community and where we are, and figuring out how to match that was really important too. So it's not just like, hey, we're just going to change this policy and we're all good. It takes a lot of thought to make sure that our campers are safe and respected at camp. So
I'll say 2 things before I give Alex the last word. And that is, I see a post here in the chat from Bria Cartwright, who's offered to share some of the planning and preparatory documentation that her camp put together, and others may have that as well. So I hope that people do continue to share, and that's wonderful to assist with people. Bria has published her email address here, so I'll put that in the follow-up email, and that way people can contact her and be in touch with one another. The second thing is the 2 winners. This is great. They both have color last names, so the 2 winners of the $50 Everything Summer Camp gift certificates are, and I will send you the promo codes, and all you need to do is shop your brains out and enter your gift certificate number, Aaron Green and Poppy White. So congratulations to Aaron Green and Poppy White. Alex, I'll let you have the last word, and Sarah, you can close us out.
Great. Well, thanks for inviting me to share some thoughts. And I think that the chat reveals this is a tricky and complex issue. I think approached correctly, it'll improve your camp for every camper, not just for transgender campers. So I encourage camps to engage in this process and think it out and treat it as a multi-year process that is exciting and can reinvigorate the mission of your camp.
Fantastic. We keep muting ourselves to be polite. All right.
Okay. It's back.
There you go.
I'm here. All I'm saying is thank you. You could have guessed that. And also, Scott and I really want people to see our video on expertonlinetraining.com, and also send us feedback, because you might see something that was relevant in August, but is now not relevant, or we made a mistake. And so the more we can have these conversations with each other and start those dialogues, the better we can serve all the campers that come to our camp. And also remember that as a camp director, there's 10,000 things you have to be an expert in. And so if you need some help talking about the subject or making adjustments to your own camp, Alex is one of the best experts out there. So please reach out to him.